attracts me about watching what it does to people, what it does to a whole environment.
When you get inside the note, it's like the most beautiful woman in the room gives you a French kiss.
Carlos Santana, guitar god, musical icon, and one of the most influential artists of all time, with a career spanning decades, a signature sound that changed rock forever, and a $120 million net worth to his name, you'd think life has been nothing but smooth sailing for the Rock and Roll Hall of Famer. But behind the screaming solos and Grammy-winning hits lies a story most fans never hear about. Born on July 20th, 1947 in Autlanda, Navarro, Mexico, Carlos Santana's first instrument wasn't even a guitar. It was a violin. His father, a professional violinist, had dreams of his son following in his footsteps, but destiny had other plans. By the time Carlos was 7, his family moved to Tijuana, and let's just say the struggle was real. Instead of a carefree childhood, he and his brothers were hustling, selling gum, shining shoes, and even singing Mexican folk songs for money.
Song Mr. 50 cents a song. Yeah. Da, da, all that, all in folk Mexican songs.
As if that wasn't enough, his father also dragged him to dirt floor saloons where he performed while witnessing the dark side of nightlife, including a police officer assaulting a prostitute. At 8 years old, Carlos finally picked up the instrument that would change his life, the guitar. And from there, things got, well, pretty scandalous. By 14, Carlos had had enough of playing in sketchy bars and decided to strike out on his own. His new gig, providing live music for strippers, earning a grand total of $9 a week while working brutal hours from 4 p.m. to 6 a.m.
And I learned how they walked, it's called articulation. Body articulation.
Santana found the experience completely numbing. Imagine being so overexposed to that world that nothing shocks you anymore. After a while, you learn the most sensual thing is innocence, he later admitted. But his early struggles weren't just about the harsh nightlife. He also endured something far worse. During his time scraping by in Tijuana, Santana was repeatedly abused by an American man who lured him in with food, clothes, and toys. This continued almost every other day until one disturbing incident finally made Santana realize the truth. One day, the man slapped Santana after catching him watching a woman through a window. That slap...
You were angry about the fact that you had been molested?
Yes.
By?
It went from 57 to 59.
It was a wake-up call. Santana suddenly saw the man for what he truly was, a deeply sick individual. It was a horrific experience, but one that he eventually overcame as he channeled all his pain into his music. Just when you think things couldn't get more dramatic, Santana's family uprooted him once again, this time to San Francisco. But here's the thing, he didn't want to go. Carlos had gotten used to his wild lifestyle in Tijuana, so the idea of moving to America and attending a boring junior high didn't sound appealing. He rebelled, refusing to eat, staying angry, and completely shutting down. And then came the ultimate betrayal. Before leaving Mexico, Santana had saved up a small fortune to pay for his immigration papers. But when he went to get his money, it was gone. His mother had taken it to pay for his sister's dental work. She left him with just $300, which he planned to use for a brand new Stratocaster guitar. But guess what? She spent that too, on rent. Santana was furious. So much so that he took the $20 his mother offered and ran away back to Tijuana, back into the strip club world. For a whole year, he lived on his own, completely estranged from his family. But his relatives weren't having it. They literally kidnapped him, stuffed him in a car, and dragged him back to San Francisco. And just like that, his life in the U.S. began, not by choice, but by force. So by 1966, Santana pulled together a band of street musicians, David Brown, Marcus Malone, and Greg Rowley, and formed the Santana Blues Band. They weren't just another rock group, they were actually different. Their sound was a wild mix of Latin rock, jazz, blues, salsa, and African rhythms. Nobody had heard anything like it before. And guess what? People loved it. By 1967, the Santana Blues Band weren't just playing in small clubs anymore. They were opening for The Who and rock legends like Steve Miller and Howlin' Wolf.
Well, don't you worry, baby, don't worry.
They were begging Santana's band to tour with them. This was it, the moment he had worked for. But just when everything was falling into place, his body betrayed him. At just 19 years old, Santana was diagnosed with tuberculosis. Yes, tuberculosis. A disease that was basically a thing of the past in the U.S. by then. Instead of rocking stages, he was stuck in a hospital bed for 3 months. Doctors pumped him full of penicillin. But then, his body rejected it, so they switched to streptomycin, which, fun fact, had to be injected straight into his butt. So while his band was supposed to be touring with rock legends, Santana was lying on his stomach, unable to sit for weeks because his backside was so sore from injections. And as if that wasn't bad enough, he had to finish high school from his hospital bed with a tutor. It was the worst possible timing. He was this close to stardom, and suddenly, his career was on pause. By 1969, Santana had signed with Columbia Records, but the label wasn't vibing with their long name. So, snip snip, the Santana Blues Band was no more. Just Santana. Short, sweet, marketable. But signing a record deal didn't mean instant success. If anything, they were still struggling nobodies. That is, until their biggest supporter, Bill Graham, worked some industry magic and secured them a spot at Woodstock.
Before I stop loving you, you got to change.
Now, performing at Woodstock sounds like a dream, right? Well, for Carlos Santana, it was a full-blown hallucination. When he and his band touched down at Max Yasgur's farm, the place was already a madhouse. But here's the kicker. The festival was running super behind schedule. Carlos was told they wouldn't be playing until after the Grateful Dead, which meant he had hours to kill. So like any good rock star of the era, he popped some LSD, courtesy of his buddy Jerry Garcia. Big, freaking mistake, because just as he was settling into his trippy little wonderland, someone came rushing up to him like, "You're on in 20 minutes. Sorry, what?" At that point, Carlos was peaking. He later admitted he had no idea who he was, where he was, or how to even hold a guitar. Worse, he was seeing things like full on his guitar turning into a snake and slithering in his hands.
I started playing, of course, the neck of the guitar started wavering, like a snake.
Instead of being solid, it's like a snake, electric snake.
Now, can you imagine playing in front of 500,000 people while your instrument is literally hissing at you? Well, Carlos did it. According to him, he prayed his way through the entire set. No joke. He was begging God to let him hit the right notes and swore that if he made it through, he'd never touch drugs again.
You guys freaked him out. I go, really? He goes, he loved your energy, man. He loved your performance.
And guess what? He killed it. After that mind-blowing performance, Santana knew they had to strike while the iron was hot. Their debut album, Santana, dropped just weeks later in August 1969. The album sold 4 million copies and went triple platinum. And let's talk about its breakout hit, Evil Ways. It parked itself on Billboard for over 2 years.
You got to change your evil ways, baby.
But Carlos wasn't done. In 1970, they dropped Abraxas. And if you thought their debut was big, this album was a monster. It shot straight to #1. One giving us timeless hits like Black Magic Woman and Oye Como Va. By 1971, Santana was officially unstoppable. They dropped Santana 3, featuring a fresh-faced Neil Schon. Yes, the Neil Schon, who would later start Journey.
I ain't got nobody.
Then came Caravanserai in 1972, where they ditched their usual sound for something more experimental. Bold move? Absolutely. But behind the scenes, things were starting to crack. You know one thing about fame. It changes things. One by one, band members started bouncing. Some left over money, some over creative differences. By the late 70s, Santana was just Carlos Santana. No more original members, no more band, just one man and his guitar. And instead of clinging to the past, he embraced it. He collaborated with music heavyweights like Buddy Miles, Herbie Hancock, and John McLaughlin, proving he didn't need anyone to keep the magic alive. And in 1986, he dropped his first solo album, Blues for Salvador. And whoo, did it hit! The album was raw, personal, and the critics loved it. So much so that it won him his first Grammy for Best Instrumental Performance.
The Grammy goes to Supernatural, Santana.
After nearly 2 decades in the industry, Carlos finally had his first major award. But things went downhill again in no time. Carlos Santana was down bad in the 90s. After back-to-back flops, Columbia Records dropped him like a hot potato. Then Polydor took a chance, and that didn't work out either. By 1992, he was done. No label, no buzz, and the industry had officially labeled him a washed-up relic. But Santana knew he had fire left in him. Then, in 1997, tragedy struck. His father, Jose Santana, passed away, and the grief was so heavy that even listening to music felt unbearable. For a while, he disappeared from the scene. But when he was finally ready to step back into the spotlight, his then-wife, Deborah King Santana, pushed him to reconnect with Clive Davis, aka the same guy who first signed him to Columbia back in the day. Davis didn't just bring him back. He set him up for a monster comeback. Instead of Santana doing another solo project, Davis lined up some of the biggest names in music for an all-star collaboration album. Enter Supernatural, 1999. Packed with features from Rob Thomas, Lauryn Hill, Wyclef Jean, Eric Clapton, Everlast, and more.
Whispering in my ear.
And let's talk about the hits. Smooth with Rob Thomas, a cultural reset. Maria Maria, so iconic that Santana even turned it into a Mexican restaurant chain.
Ladies and gents.
The song was even sampled by DJ Khaled and Rihanna in Wild Thoughts.
Me that transforms his guitar into something you might think he's trying.
The album was a beast, selling over 15 million copies and sweeping the 1999 Grammys with 8 wins, including Album of the Year. That day, Santana tied Michael Jackson for the most Grammy wins in a single night. Not bad for someone the industry had written off, right? And the wins just kept coming.
Thank you so very much.
He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1998, named one of the 100 greatest guitarists of all time by Rolling Stone, and honored at the Kennedy Center in 2013. By 2016, he was back with his OG 70s band for Santana 4, which smashed into the Billboard Top 5. The following year, he teamed up with the Isley Brothers for Power of Peace, and in 2019, he dropped Africa Speaks, which the New York Times called one of the fiercest albums of his career. But here's the real flex. Santana is one of the only artists in history to have a top 10 album in 6 straight decades, beating out everyone except the Rolling Stones. Oh, and let's not forget the 20th anniversary of Supernatural, the 50th anniversary of his Woodstock performance, and the 50th anniversary of Abraxas. This man stayed winning. Carlos Santana has spent decades proving he's unstoppable, but in 2022, fans got a scare when he suddenly collapsed on stage during a concert.
Get him some cold water!
The footage went viral, and for hours, the internet was in a panic. Was this the end of the legendary guitarist's career? Turns out, it wasn't as dramatic as it seemed. Santana had been battling food poisoning and was severely dehydrated. His team reassured everyone that he was fine. He just forgot to eat and drink water before the show. 2 weeks later, he was up and about like nothing happened.
Santana, how are you? TMZ here. You look fantastic.
Reflection of your light.
Yes, how
Thank
you
you so
feeling?
much.
But then, in 2023, he landed in hot water. Not for his music, but for comments he made during a concert. While performing on his 1001 Rainbows tour, Santana declared,
A woman is a woman and a man is a man.
adding that he stood with Dave Chappelle. The backlash was immediate. Hours later, he issued an apology, saying he respected everyone's personal beliefs, only to delete it the next morning and replace it with a cryptic poem, The Energy of. Consciousness generates its own kind. Hate begets hate. Love begets love. Translation? A very poetic sorry, but not really. And speaking of foot and mouth moments, let's rewind to 2017 when Santana really ruffled feathers. After Adele beat Beyoncé for Album of the Year at the Grammys, Santana attempted to explain why. He said Adele won because she can sing. While Beyoncé was more about the visuals, basically calling her music background noise for a fashion show. The Bayhive did not take that well. Santana quickly backpedaled, claiming his words were taken out of context and that he had the utmost respect for Beyoncé. Nice save. But let's be real, some fans still haven't forgiven him for that one. Carlos Santana has had a career filled with highs and lows, but his personal life? That's a whole other roller coaster. For over 3 decades, he was married to Deborah King, the woman who stood by him through the 70s rock star madness, the 80s career slump, and his late 90s revival. They weren't just life partners, they were business partners too. Together, they opened a chain of Mexican restaurants, launched the Milagro Foundation for Children in Need, and when Santana's finances were in shambles, it was King who swooped in and saved them. I'd probably be a hobo if it wasn't for her, he admitted back in 2000. But while she was holding things down at home, Santana was out on the road, and not exactly behaving like a family man. King later revealed that after their children were born, he was busy sleeping with other women. She put up with it for years, but after releasing a memoir that exposed the infidelity, she decided enough was enough. In 2007, she filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. Santana later apologized publicly, but by then the damage was done. The divorce sent him into a dark spiral. In 2008, he confessed that he had attempted suicide 7 times. The pain wasn't just from losing his marriage. It was also rooted in trauma from his childhood. Santana had been sexually abused by a family friend at age 10, and those memories, combined with the failure of his marriage, nearly broke him. He credits spirituality and faith for pulling him back from the edge.
I really let go of the experience, and I stopped being so angry and so mean.
I'm free. By the grace of the holiest of holiest, I am free.
Now at 77, Santana has found peace and purpose. His difficult childhood made him deeply passionate about helping children, and he's used his success to make a difference. His Milagro Foundation has supported children in Southern California for years, and he's also funded the Carlos Santana Arts Academy in North Hills, helping bring music and art education to underserved youth. Even during the COVID-19 pandemic, Santana and his wife, who just happens to be his touring drummer, kept mentoring young musicians through the Little Kids Rock Foundation. And yes, his wife is Cindy Blackman, the drummer he married in 2010. Santana actually proposed to her on stage during a concert in Chicago, right after her drum solo. They tied the knot later that year in Hawaii.
There's no challenge because we both adore each other, and the honeymoon is going to be forever.
While other musicians have faded with time, Santana, he's still got the same fire he had at 19,